Yacon, this is a root from the Andes Mountains. It's not all that productive, unfortunately. You can see the little top of these little roots on the top of the crown. They look a lot like Jerusalem artichoke, which they're related to. They're in the sunflower family. They make an edible root that they say it tastes like an apple that grows in the ground. And it is, it's very sweet. I had them, some of you guys probably know Mart Hale, who lives down in Bellevue. We had a meetup at his house once that I missed because I double booked something. The Yacon root he grew it in a wicking bed, so it was constantly moist. It doesn't really like the heat, it doesn't like a lot of harsh sun, and it likes regular water. So it's pretty much ruled out of my gardening plans because I like stuff that takes no work. And Mart felt the same way, but he grew it in this bed and it grew really great. And we harvested these big, beautiful Yacon roots, and they were delicious. I mean, they taste like candy out of the ground. And the sugar in them is apparently inulin instead of sucrose or fructose. So diabetics, they make a Yacon syrup that you'll see in the health food store. And, diabetics can enjoy it and get their sugar fix without killing themselves. But I have found, I've grown it out, this has been here for 2 years and hasn't bloomed, hasn't made much in the way of roots. It just seems to need more care than I want to give it. Even when I had them in my garden beds, it wasn't that productive. So I was like, it's a cool crop, but we're probably not suited to it. But that's what I do. I figure if I'm going to be a gardening author, I'd better try and test and either kill or make live almost everything I write about, unless I got somebody that's a really good source who's telling me something else. A lot of these root crops, I accumulated rare plants and tested them in research for the book Totally Crazy Easy Florida Gardening, because I wanted to make a list of which stuff is really easy, which stuff is hard, and then after about 5 years of killing stuff or having stuff just be ridiculously productive, I was like, okay, now I can write a book, because it was, we were actually eating it, and I'm not just repeating somebody else's information. So Yacon is one of the ones that's like, I really wanted it to take off because it's real cool and nobody knows about it, but didn't do very well. And Jerusalem artichokes have done terribly for me here too. My small amounts of productivity, or people will, I'm on this mailing list for Jerusalem artichokes, and this guy's always telling me about how I'm just not quite getting it right. I'm like, I've tried 6 varieties, and all of them have made me a handful of roots. When I was in Tennessee, this lady gave me a couple of little half-wilted roots. I put them in the ground, and I got buckets. And I had hundreds of pounds in the ground, and it was no work, and they grew like weeds. Here, they're pathetic. I took the same roots, brought them down with me when I came down from Tennessee after gardening there. It's just not worth it. So some of the stuff that may be awesome for up north that you read about is like the best permaculture plant, like comfrey.
Yeah, comfrey.
How many of you are having a great time growing comfrey?
Not really great.
Joseph Pierce isn't here. He's the only one.
Yeah,
and
Joseph Pierce is the only one, and that's because the comfrey's scared of him. Hey, comfrey! No, I'm just kidding. Joe showed me his comfrey, and he's got deep soil, and he's also got that kind of muck growing back there. So it's almost swamp edge where he's growing, which is good. The only places I found the comfrey did all right was where there was constant, regular moisture, and it was about half sunny. And people keep telling me, oh, you're growing comfrey, you gotta grow comfrey. I said, no, I'm not gonna grow comfrey anymore. I've killed 16 comfrey plants. And up in Tennessee, again, I had dense clay, and it was moist, and they grew like crazy. They like the cool weather. They go through the winter. Here, nah. It's a terrible plant here. If you're going to have a nutrient accumulator, the whole idea of permaculture is not to work your tail off trying to grow a permaculture plant. I mean, the idea is to work with nature, not against it. Oh my gosh, I have to have comfrey, or I'm not a permaculturalist. So forget it. It just doesn't work. If it doesn't work, stop. There's grow pokeweed. I mean, pokeweed grows like crazy. It grows in broken soil, and you can cut it and drop it. It's a perennial.
It's poisonous, though.
Yeah, it's poisonous, but it feeds the soil. It feeds the soil. So.
And it depends how you cook it, too.
18 inches tall. Yeah.
You boil it twice, then you can eat it. And it's quite tasty.
Yes, yeah, under 18 inches tall before it all starts turning red. That helps.
My chickens eat little pieces of little seedlings when they're real small. I'll see little pieces out of them, so I guess when it's really small, it must be okay.
And animals will also self-medicate too. They'll eat a little bit of a whole bunch of different toxic things on purpose. You know, I was growing tobacco out back, and the goats would come by and take a mouthful of tobacco every once in a while. You know, she out there and she's a little bit. I was like, "Can you eat that?" And the goat's just like, "Okay, well, I guess so." You know? He's going back there every 5 minutes, getting a little more. Tall, and then turn around and cut the weeds and throw them at the base of something good. You know, I mean, if it's like I don't like, wow, this fig here is getting shaded out, I cut that whole thing down and throw it around the base of the fig, and it'll feed the soil. And as you can see, I've done that before. You know, there's debris down here. I had some mulch on it at some point.
These chithonias, do you think a good idea is to like cut them down when they're green and mix them up with brown leaves and turn it into compost?
Yeah, you can do that. But it's all going to rot whatever you do. It doesn't matter if you get your ratios correct. The only time it matters, you can take some of those beans if you want them. These are velvet beans, yeah. Velvet beans are they contain L-dopa, dopamine precursors, which are a mood elevator, and they also boost your testosterone levels. So the thing is you don't want to eat them when they're dry because they're toxic. You want to kind of grow them up and then eat them in the green bean stage, cooked, not raw. And if you eat too many of them, it'll make your hair fall out. Oh. But it's a very good supplement, and you feel like you can punch through walls. It's great, you know. Just don't eat too many of them. I had a friend that was eating too many of them, and he started getting migraines. But
it's a tropical plant, right?
yes, it's also a very good nitrogen fixer too. There's a little bit of lemons and key limes there. This is actually key lime quat. It's a cross between key lime and kumquat. So it's much more cold hardy than the regular key limes, which do not grow here unprotected.
Great.
I'll take you to the back where we got some other weird stuff. This was my nursery. This is all sold now. Some folks are coming to pick the rest of it up. They've taken most of it. There's an apple right there, little apple tree. And that, I see the chop and drop around the base of the apple tree. Grapefruit.
What kind of apple tree do you have?
That is an Anna. But I have about 10 different varieties grafted on throughout the food forest. This is the Lucana Lucephala, the one that's the real good for goats and grazing animals. If we could if I could pull this tree down a little bit, y'all can have as many pods as you want.
What is it?
This is Lucana Lucephala. It's a very good nitrogen fixing tree.
Wow.
And also here's some yams. These are actually edible too.
Yeah.
I only use
Beware of the cactus. Yeah.
These are yams, the edible air potatoes. They grow very vigorous vines, so you've got to make sure that. You put them in a place where they're not a problem.
So do you have to cook them?
Yes. And they make a root that's 20 to 30 pounds easily after 2 years. Plant them in the fall, harvest them in fall 2 years from now. The first fall they'll only be like a 1 or 2 pound root, but then the second year they just go insane. Totally insane. What's that?
Plant them now?
It's called Lucana. L-E-U. It's either L-E-U-E-C-A-N-A or L-E-U-C-A-N-A. I'm not sure. I need to make a song out of it so I can actually remember it. There's a few more.
That's the way it works. Anybody else want?
So, yeah, these, again, here we go. Here's some more. These are the edible yams. These are true African yams. Sweet potatoes get called yams, but they're not related at all. Yams are climbing vines from Africa. Sweet potatoes are from South America, if I remember correctly. So if anybody wants to spread these around, these will grow. But once you have it, you can you'll get these little bulbs all over them for the next year, and you can do it again. Here's some more. And this is a running bamboo here, and as you can see, the yams are actually more vigorous than a running bamboo. Which is kind of awesome. The bamboo was like 30 foot tall earlier this year, and then the yams are like, no. Maybe 20 foot. Yeah, the yams are awesome.
That's awesome.
Look, the yams put down the bamboo.
The yams took the bamboo down.
Wow. The goats
that
love
is
bamboo.
Yes.
So are the leaves on the yams edible?
I have had people tell me that, but I haven't done it because I know there are like birth control hormones and things like that that are in it, and I don't want any endocrine disruption going on or anything weird.
Now, what are these here?
And here's some more.
That's when it's raw, right?
What
Yeah,
are these
yeah.
that have seed pods?
Those are canna lily, a wild canna lily.
What?
They're kind of cool looking. You can actually use these seeds. These are canna seeds. You can use them for buckshot.
Really?
They have
Is this
been.
one of the edible roots?
Yeah.
Does this have edible roots?
Yes. They're not very good, but they are edible. They actually don't. They're not huge roots. Yes, the goats will eat them. They're totally non-toxic leaves and roots. And you can cut them and use them over and over again. And you can see the buckshot. It looks like buckshot. This for a home invader, if you packed your own shells, this wouldn't go through the walls. You could probably seed your greenhouse with a shotgun, actually. Anybody want some seeds?
Sure.
And here's more yams. If anybody didn't get any, the yam bulbils.
Yeah, it's done at number 4.
Plant them like a potato, or
I would just plant the whole thing when they're this size. You could probably quarter them, but I don't know that they would get all the way through the winter without rotting. I have done it with the large roots in the spring, chopped them up, and then planted the pieces and had about 3/4 of them not rot. But
And you'd roast it like a sweet potato, or?
yep, cook it like anything you do with a white potato you can do with these, with the big root underground. With these, it's the same thing. You can peel these and eat them, but they're usually not big enough to really be worth it. I usually just use it for planting stock. But you can eat them too. I think the roots taste better. Now, when you do harvest the roots, when you pull the thing out of the ground, it's just hugely terrifying root. You start cutting it up and you'll realize it's so slimy. You'll be like, oh, this is going to be nasty. You'll think it's nasty. As soon as it's cooked, all that sliminess is just starch. As soon as it's cooked, it's not slimy at all. So we've made everything you can make with potatoes, we've made out of these. They're very good. The flavor's great. I mean, I've got a recipe for hash browns on my website, and we made hash browns out of these, and they're great. So if anybody wants some, pass them
You
around.
just have to peel them.
grow in the air and the ground.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
But
why-
at the base of the plant, if you can ever find the base where you planted it makes a huge, huge root. Here's another one. This is a low chill cherry tree we're testing. It's a sweet cherry. It's called Mini Royal.
Yeah.
You have to buy Mini Royal and Royal Lee together. Royal Lee is over there, kind of at the edge of the nursery, stuck back there somewhere.
What do you have in your tub?
I have a couple of pond plants that we use for mulch. And I just, you take the pond plants out and you throw them on the ground and they rot. And so, as you can see here, this is just rotting. It's like fertilizer. When they get out of the ground, when they get out of the top, they rot. So I throw duck weeds and whatever stuff I find growing in the canals. I just scrape the surface of the pond every once in a while, throw it on the ground next to a fruit tree to feed it, and it rots. Once it's out of the water, it turns back into soil. So easy. And again, see, I've got my chop and drop right next to this blood orange tree. And the pond is also filling multiple functions. It's a mosquito trap. There are fish in there to eat the mosquitoes. So the mosquitoes come and lay their eggs in the pond, and the fish eat the babies. The mother mosquito goes away thinking her life is complete, and she's put her babies in a nice place, and they're all...
What kind of fish you have in there?
I've got what are called mosquito fish. They're a little native that's all over the place, and I've also put goldfish in there. You just hardly ever see them. They're always hiding. So that grows me biomass. That also is storing water in case we had a hurricane or something like that. We could still irrigate our gardens. I've got 2 more over there. We could still just dip into it and do it. I put the little fence around it because I didn't want any kids falling in.
Recycled the pot crap, isn't it?
Yep. It was trash. It was thrown out by the road, so I picked it up. And then it's also providing a little extra warmth on cold nights for this blood orange, which is not completely cold hardy. So it's got about 4 or 5 functions that it's filling. Plus it's a place for the dragonflies to live. We have a lot of dragonflies around here, and I've seen the larvae on the edge. Fish don't seem to eat them.
And what are these?
This is the Mexican sunflower, like I have out front. It's just smaller because I've kept it chopped because it's real close to that tree. I don't want it to shade too much. Back here I've let grow wild. There's all kinds of edible stuff back there, and I stuck in nut tree seedlings and all kinds of things. And there's loquats. That's a mulberry right there that I put in when it was 18 inches tall. And then this is mostly cassava mixed in back here too. There's a lot of cassava. It's time to harvest.
Do you have any trouble with your mulberry trees? Getting diseases or anything?
We've had some get spots and leaf drop and that kind of thing, but not a lot. Not a lot of issues. I planted a whole bunch of different varieties, so if one variety doesn't take well, I've got backups. I'll show you this. This was all my gardens. There's not much here. This is all sweet potatoes right now. That's all got to be harvested. I harvested these sweet potatoes already, but because the house was up for sale, we didn't replant. Normally in fall, this would be rows of cabbages and broccoli at this point, but we just quit. Let it go. These here are peaches. These two. And these are peaches that I started from seeds.
Really?
So these are from pits.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and these are from pits, and not only that, these trees are only 3 years old. Wow. They bore their first peaches at 1.5 years. They went into bloom.
So those aren't Florida variety peaches.
They are Florida, well, they're not a named variety. They came off a Tropic Beauty peach that my aunt had planted, and it was a couple of years old. It had a bunch of fruit. Squirrels ate a bunch of the fruit and dropped pits all over the ground. My aunt had moved out of town, so we were over there taking care of their property. Like, wow, there's a lot of pits on the ground here. So it's like, I'm going to germinate them. Now, to germinate peach pits, it's a little tricky. Peach pits have been designed with a timer inside. Because, if they dropped off of the tree and they sprouted right away like a regular seed, the frost would come and kill them. So they've been designed to hit the ground, and then they start counting. After cold hits, they count a certain amount of days or time of cold weather before they then start counting warm weather. So they've got a timer built into them that gets them through winter period. So what you have to do, normally, a fruit falls to the ground and it rots, and the leaves cover it, and then it gets chilly out, and it's cold, and so it starts counting. It's cold, tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. Then after when it gets cold enough for long enough, it puts down roots. So it'll actually germinate at 35, 40 degrees. It'll start putting roots down into the soil. Then when the spring comes, it counts off a little bit of warm days, and suddenly it'll shoot the top up once it's been warm for a long enough period of time. So if you just go and you plant it in a pot and you don't pay any attention to the dormancy cycle, it'll just sit there and sit there and sit there, and it may just rot in the ground. So what you do is, you got your peach pits. I crack them open because you get a higher germination rate if you crack them out and take the kernels out of the center of the peaches, which is really hard to do. If you ever try to crack a peach pit, it's like... But if you could smack them open and take the little kernels out, and I soak them overnight, and then put them in slightly moist potting soil and put them in the refrigerator. And the first time I did this, it just blew my mind, because at 3 months or so, suddenly there's little white roots all through the bag. It's like they just all started growing. Right around 2 to 3 months, like little hairs come out. And then I took them out of there and I popped them in pots, and the sprouts came up in warm weather about 2 or 3 weeks later. So you can get a real high germination rate, like 75% or so on peach pits by doing that. Now, if you were to get peaches from up in Georgia, they may not have the correct chill hours, or they may not be all that suited to this climate. They may bloom at the wrong time or never bloom or whatever. So if you find a peach tree that's growing and it's got peaches on it, or you go to the farmer's market and say, where are these peaches from? And they say, oh, there's Florida peaches. Chances are you can take those pits and sprout them and get them to go. Now, the commercial people will say, oh, don't do it from pit. You don't know what you're going to get. You'll see that, oh, you ain't going to get nothing good, or it takes 100 years. No, it doesn't take 100 years. Peaches are like vegetables. They grow so fast, particularly with how long our warm season is. I mean, seriously, 3 years old. I mean, we got so many peaches this spring off of these trees at like 2.5 years old. They had all these peaches. it was so little work. Put a couple of seedlings in the ground. I put them in when they were like this tall, you know, and they just whoom, right to the sky. They grow 6 feet or so a year or more. And the commercial people don't like that there's a variation in genetics. They want exactly the same peach over and over again, which is why they have root stocks, and then they graft the variety on, like Red Delicious Apple. We want exactly the same shiny, mealy, tasteless apple over and over again. It looks like the one that the witch brought to poison Snow White. So we want that apple, you know. But if you plant seeds, you get a variety. Like this peach here acted a lot like a Tropic Beauty. In February, it burst into bloom, and it was all blooming. And then we got a freeze in March, and just like the Tropic Beauty, it loses all its blooms and it's done for the year. You got to wait till next year to get fruit. This one here, the commercial people wouldn't like it. Normally, they would protect the blooms. You know, they might have misters or smokers or whatever. I'm not that interested in that. This tree started blooming in the end of February and continued blooming all the way through March. And so it got hit by the frost and it lost a few of the lower blooms, and then it kept blooming along the branches. Now these are both from the same mother, but the genetics were different enough. The bloom cycle on this one was really long. As you can see, this one is blooming right now. For some reason, it's confused. This one's not. There's just enough difference in genetics. I actually discovered something that is really good for North Florida peaches, and that is a long bloom season. And it also means that the peach has matured over a longer period of time. So instead of you getting a ton of peaches all done at once, and you got to get all the Mexican guys out there to pick them and ship them and move them up to, you know, wherever they're selling. We did, you know, this is a backyard peach. And if you were to take a piece off of this and graft it onto your Chickasaw plum or onto another peach you got, you would have the characteristic of a long bloom season. So you could call this like Dave's long blooming peach if you wanted to. This is one that I would graft on for backyards.
Could you
for the long bloom.
Could you take a cutting off of that and get it to root?
Possibly. Peaches are not the easiest thing to root, but they do graft very easily. So, you know, what you do is you start a bunch of seedling peaches, and if you really like this one, and you got one of your seedling peaches, like if I said, you know what, I don't like the fact that this always blooms in February, I could cut the top of that tree off, tack in a couple of pieces of this tree, and then next year I would have 2 trees that were doing the long blooming. You know, so there's no loss. I mean, if you started a whole bunch of peach pits, say you started 20 of them in your yard, and you go, oh, you know, I don't need 20 peach trees. No, of course you don't. But, and when it only takes 1.5 years to 2 years to start getting your first fruit, you don't have much loss. You may end up with a peach that's really big, or you might have one with a really sweet flesh, or you may get a real sour one, and you go, man, that makes the best peach pie ever. When you add sugar to this one, the flavor's better. Right, because you want sour apples for this or sour peaches for this. You know, you don't know what you're going to get, and if you get a tree that's lousy, you can always turn around and use the wood in your smoker if you wanted to get rid of it, or you could cut the top of it off and graft on a variety that you like. Doesn't matter. Another thing that they don't like about the commercial people don't like about the seedling grown peaches is that they'll tell you in Florida, nematodes will destroy peach roots. So they've bred specific varieties like Nemagard or such and such number 183. You know, they've got these rootstocks that are named because they're very resistant to nematodes. Nematodes like hot, sandy, dry soil. They hate it when you mix in a bunch of organic matter. A lot of the orchards are dealing, you know, spray the ground with Roundup and just have it bare, you know, and so there's not a lot of organic matter in the soil. And of course, if you're growing 500 peach trees, you can't necessarily afford to bring in piles of mulch or compost regularly to deal with the compost, you know, to get rid of the nematodes. But in a backyard, it's no big deal. So here, there's all kinds of compost and junk and old, like my empty pots, when I've got really good potting soil, I'll just dump it here. The sweet potato vines get thrown on the ground, paper plates, eggs, you know, egg cartons, all of the rough stuff right from the kitchen has been dumped at the base of these for the last couple of years. So we actually will compost right here at the base of the tree. So you've always got continuously rotting stuff coming down onto the ground and driving the nematodes away. And that's what you want. You want just lots of organic matter. So the trees are thriving. They don't have any problems. But, you know, it's, and the investment was, you know, cracking some pits one evening and putting a whole bunch of them in. And I ended up selling like 20 or 30 seedling peaches in the nursery, and then probably giving away another 30 or so to different people. Hey, try one of these, try one of these. There's one guy that's got 3 of my peaches in a row. One of them makes peaches this big. One of them's making peaches that are like this big. And one of them has like kind of reddish peaches on it. It's like, that's cool. You never would have seen that before. You know, and if one of them isn't any good, so what? You know, take a piece off of Dave's, you know, long blooming peach and put it on there. It's not a big deal. You know, so you just make it work for you.
You could actually patent the variety, couldn't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Totally could. Could patent it as a Florida variety. And I could have done that in the nursery too. I started a bunch of stuff and would just graft on top of it. I was thinking of doing a series of fruit trees that were just grafted on Chickasaw plum. You know, here it's Chickasaw plum rootstock. You just have to tell everybody, keep cutting the suckers down or they'll take up your whole yard. This is something really weird. I'm sure none of you have seen before, because I didn't see it until like 2 years ago. See this big gnarly looking thing?
Yeah.
It's ready. That is Bulbifera, Dioscorea bulbifera. This is an air potato, but this is an air potato like no air potato you've ever seen. This is the edible Dioscorea bulbifera, which got snuck in to the state, apparently.
Is it from the Philippines?
This variety, I think, came from a missionary in Africa that snuck it over the Mexican border. So, and it ended up down at Hart. And unlike, you know, the poisonous ones that we have growing all over the place, which look like a big ball, this is edible just like a potato right off of the plant. You can just take it and plant
There are a
it.
bunch of them up there, yeah? Is that
Those
Those
are
are
the other
yams.
ones. Those are alata.
Those are the yams.
As you can see the difference. This is the most beautiful architectural looking thing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Never seen anything like that. Yeah.
No, I saw it and I went,
Yeah, right.
wow.
Fun to see.
And God is really creative.
That's
I wouldn't have thought of this, you know? It's almost fractal.
Kind of looks like the Elephant Man a little bit.
Yeah. A little. Yeah. That's kind of creepy.
Right.
Is it invasive?
It's my middle name.
Don't know. I don't
does
know.
it taste like?
It doesn't seem to be as crazy. It's supposed to taste like a potato. This is the first one I've ever successfully grown. See, the University of Florida released those beetles that destroy this variety. So just as this variety started getting tested in the state, they released the beetle to kill all of them. So
Oh my gosh.
this may not even be possible to grow here in another year or two. They're already getting
So let the
destroyed.
bidding start. What?
Yeah. Yeah. Wherever I go, I'm taking this with me. These are so hard to find,
Oh my gosh.
but you can get them if you're lucky. You go down to the Heart Institute and ask for Josh Jameson. He's the
Or they
brilliant
could
guy
just
down
go to
there.
the Florida Permaculture Convergence at
Were
Harvard.
they passing them
Are they
around?
doing that again?
Yeah.
They do it every year.
Somebody
Yeah.
told me that they were going to stop doing it.
Nope.
Awesome.
There's going to be more convergences. Permaculture Ocala, the Alachua County Guild, we'll have our own convergence for this part of Florida. So, yeah.
It's very good because
So even if we don't do the statewide thing, we'll do the
instead
smaller
of, I
ones.
mean, when you go down south, you just get jealous. You know, you just
And that's where you're
Sad.
going, right?
yeah. So eventually the jealousy wins. It's like, what am I doing? I can go. By the way, these are moringas here. If you haven't seen,
Oh, wow.
it's one of the healthiest trees you can grow.
I have a question about your pruning of the peach trees.
Yeah.
Did you prune them to have these multiple trunks on purpose, or what?
Actually, the natural way they grow is in a big, crazy cup like this. I did two. This one I cut back as an experiment to see what would happen, and it just grew a bunch of new branches.
Wow.
This one, I took the branches and bent them all sideways to increase the amount of sunlight coming into the middle. And now, if I was going to prune it up properly, I would, in the spring, cut off a lot of these little weeny side branches and take the stuff out of the center so the most sunlight is coming down through the center, because you want as much exposure as possible to all the branches as possible, because you get the most fruit that way. And peaches love being cut back. They just honestly don't care. You could cut this tree down to the ground and it will come back the next year in fruit.
cut it?
I cut it in February, like beginning of February, right before they wake up. And cut it. You can do a little pruning later, but I would
So I can't get a piece of this graft right now then.
probably wouldn't work. Yeah.
Do you mind the fact that they're like too tall to harvest without a ladder?
Well, what I have
Just pull the
found
branches
is
down?
when the fruit grows on those skinny branches, they start falling over. This was almost touching the ground earlier.
Really?
If it did get, peaches can get 18 foot or taller. If it did get way too out of control, I would just saw the middle of it out. Or what I did, I used cinder blocks and paracord and tied it all sideways. Also, if you have branches that go straight up, they tend to make more hormones for leaf development. If you have a branch that goes sideways, the auxins build up inside of it. Auxin is what stimulates bud, bloom development, and fruit development. So if it's going straight up, it says leaves, and if it's going sideways, it says fruit. So if you bend, there's a great movie called Permaculture Orchard, which Paul Wheaton was part of. And the guy's up in Quebec, and he's got an apple orchard. He's running on permaculture principles. If you get a chance to watch it or buy it, it's very good. He bends all of his branches instead of pruning. He just bends them all sideways and lets the tree get all crazy gnarly to the sides, and it produces a lot of apples, and he doesn't have to keep cutting it. And so what I was trying to do with this tree was bend it. That one I pruned, this one I bent. And we just figured out how it would go. We did something similar. This is a mulberry right here. Illinois ever-bearing mulberry, which probably has mulberries on it. If you guys see any mulberries, help yourself. They're delicious. Like a blackberry without seeds and perfectly sweet.
And they tend to grow pretty easily, the mulberries.
Mulberry
yeah.
yeah, it's probably the easiest fruit tree to grow and
Yeah.
one of the most productive.
Makes a great jam.
Yeah.
Oh,
in
don't
wine.
worry about it. It's a weird year for
I think they even wrote a song about it.
Wait till next year.
They look very fun to look
So wait and see what happens next year. Now these berries are a lot bigger in the spring. They bear smaller berries in the fall. They have like 2 or 3 crops for the year. There's some good ones up there too. This tree is about 4 years old now. When I put it in, at 2 years old, it bore 6 gallons of mulberries. So I did the math on it. So with the cost of organic berries, the $20 that I spent on this mulberry tree originally had, was worth, the berries were worth like 10 times that, 1 bucket of berries. So, it's like a no-brainer.
How do you propagate these?
You can propagate them from cuttings, but sporadically. Some varieties do real well, some will just totally rot.
If I took a piece of this,
You could try it. Yeah, I mean, feel free to take a piece. I found that the best results were under mist in the spring. If I like in a mist house where they stay constantly moist, a lot of times they would leaf out, and I would think, oh man, this thing's rooted, and then I would pull it up, and there'd be totally no roots. I just didn't want to root until I put it under mist.
I heard something about rooting in running water.
Yeah, because the oxygen keeps it from rotting. That would do it. And
thicker piece or thinner piece do that?
try both. Usually the smaller, thinner pieces have rooted better for me, but time of year makes a difference too. I have my greenhouse right here, so I don't have that to show off. I sold it already. But,
A lot of us have seen pictures of
grapevines.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. My video that I did on protecting plants from frost, it's like called 4 Ways to Protect Your Plants or something like that, has gotten like 10,000 views on YouTube. It's one of my best videos for people who watched it over and over again. And it's different ways of managing frost, which reminds me, I want you all to see the back. Okay, watch here. There's a couple of metal posts sticking out of the ground. I don't want anybody to run into, so don't step on this pot. Right there. There's one here too.
I see a roll on the other edge too.
These pieces of rebar really hurt to run into.
I bought a couple coconuts up from Hollywood, and they're sprouting. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, they've got a beautiful frond coming up out of them. Tree, if nothing else.
Okay, so this is the south wall of my house.
Oh.
And I discovered that this wall is Miami for about 2 feet out. we realized that it did not freeze within 2 feet of this wall overnight. Even when we had a 12-degree night, the weeds right next to the wall didn't freeze. So if you come over here, I don't know how many of us we could pack over here, but. And then after we get tired of looking at it, we take a load of mulch and we cover the top of it. And that's easy. These bananas here, you can see the banana hands up here.
Wow.
People will tell you that North Florida is a bad place to grow bananas, and generally that's true. However, we have a little microclimate right along the back here. So if you see behind you here against the wall, see the giant, they look like grapefruits hanging next to the wall there? That's the world's largest lemon.
Meyer lemons?
Ponderosa.
It's, Ponderosa, yes.
Wow, really?
There's 3 Ponderosa lemons there. They're a lemon that's like the size of a honeydew almost. And they taste just like a regular lemon, but they're massive. You can make a great pitcher of lemonade out of one of those. And then in the middle here, this is a key lime tree. Key limes are not tolerant of freezing whatsoever, but I put some conduit here next to the wall, tied the tree back to this wall, and it never freezes. The top of it, right at the roof line, will freeze, but along the wall, it doesn't freeze. And so we get key limes every year off of this key lime tree, and we make key lime pie, because I grew up with key lime pie down in South Florida. And I have friends that have planted the key limes out in their yards. They'll freeze to the ground and die. I mean, first winter, it gets down to 22 degrees, the tree's dead. You know, they get damaged at 32, and by about 28 degrees, it's toast. And, you know, anybody that's lived out here for a while, particularly in the country, you know, it just doesn't work. I mean, we will get 15 degrees every 4 years or so. You know, it's not good. So right against the wall here, there is black pepper, coffee, guava, lemons, longevity spinach, and a few other things. This is coffee. Cool. This seedling of coffee went through last winter without any frost damage whatsoever. That is impossible. Absolutely impossible that coffee will grow here. But it does